There's quite a bit of speculation regarding the identity of the kings of the East. And so the idea of the kings of the East is presented as a mysterious dynamic. However, when you do a translation of kings of the East, you come away with a very clear understanding of what is intended by this phrase, kings of the East. The idea of kings of the East is pointing directly at Anatolia. We've talked about Anatolia before. We've talked about Turkey before. We've talked about the relationship between the construct of Turkey and the construct of India and the construct of American. And in many instances, these constructs are merged. So there's some commingling going on there with respect to this idea of Turkey. And so also with respect to this idea of Anatolia. Interestingly, when you do a translation, something that looks very similar to Andalusia comes up. And so we're going to look at that. But what we see here very clearly is that this idea of the East is talking about Anatolia. And Anatolia has a very complex history. It's not only a complex history, it's a very central history to many of the narratives of the people around the earth. We even saw a connection between Anatolia and the west coast of Africa. And so, of course, what complicates matters is that you have all of these histories of migration. And so it's very possible for the kings of the East to migrate to the West. And we've seen this throughout history. You see people migrating all over the place, changing the names of places, appropriating identities. And that may very well be the case with respect to this idea of kings of the East. These are some other constructs, other words that mean the same thing as kings of the East. We have aurora, so kings of the aurora, kings of the dawn, kings of the morning sun, kings of the sunrise, kings of the orient, kings of the Helios, kings of the soul. And you even see where the construct of corona is embedded in this whole idea of the East. And so, with respect to the corona, you have what is known as the solar crown. That's what the corona is essentially. So, in order to get a very clear understanding of what is meant by kings of the East in the book of Revelation, we do a translation here of the word that's presented. And so there are a number of words presented for the construct of East in the scripture, but when you look specifically at this particular notation, it specifically means Anatolia. And so you can see here when you look at the translation that they are talking about the kings of the East, which is also referring to the sun. And so it's the East and the sun. And so it is Anatolia and also essentially Helios. And that's because Anatolia essentially means the East. It essentially means the sun, the rising sun. It is noted that when doing some of these translations that Andolo comes up. And this looks very similar to Andalus. And you can see a couple of spellings there with the Anadolu and then the Andolo. Now, many people will offer in terms of etymology that Andalus or Andalusia comes from Vandals. But if you do a deconstruction of Vandals, you do the translations and the transliterations, you don't exactly come away with Andalusia. And it's pretty much impossible to talk about Al-Andalus or Andalusia without considering those entities that are known as the Moors historically. So those identities are tied together, and those identities are also tied together with Anatolia. And so you see here, with respect to this word Anatolia, Anatole, that it means a rising of the sun. sunrises. Specifically, it means the east. And so there's not really a lot of mystery here in terms of this Kings of the East. It's been very well spelled out here. It's unclear why theologians are dancing around this or why these religious scholars are dancing around this because it's sitting right in your face. And so, again, it indicates here Anatello, east, east, rising, sunrise. And here you can see when looking at the etymology of Anatolia that it is the ancient name for Asia Minor. So individuals are correct when they are indicating that kings of the East are about the kings of whatever we are calling Asia right now. It's important to keep in mind, however, that Asia could have been anywhere on the map originally because again, people have moved around and people have changed the names of places over time. If you recall, when we were looking at that kingdom of Judah on the west coast of Africa, there was also a river Euphrates over there. And so it doesn't appear anymore. But that in and of itself is interesting in terms of the relationship between the narrative of Kings of the East and what's going on in the west coast of Africa and some of the ancestral dynamics that appear to be related to the individuals on the west coast of Africa, specifically Igbo, Yoruba. There is a connection to Turkey. And so going on here, we see with the etymology that Anatolia, again, is the ancient name for Asia Minor. In medieval Latin, Anatolia, again, the east, the sunrise, literally a rising above the horizon, so the sunrise. And also, there is that construct of Ana in there. And if you remember our conversations about Ana, you know that that construct is also very important in terms of spiritual discourse. So it's important in terms of scripture, and then you also have it important in terms of Eastern religions. They have the Ana, Anunnaki. There's quite a bit going on with Ana. And Britannica also offers a little bit of information about Anatolia or the East, which gives a little bit more information about understanding these kings of the East. And if you look at the top, you see that Anatolia is Turkish Anadolu, which again is very similar to Andalusia, Andalus, also called Asia Minor, the peninsula of land that today constitutes the Asian portion of Turkey. And so over in that area, it's often referred to as Eurasia. So this sort of combination of Europe and Asia. And technically over there, it's sort of Afro-Eurasia or Africa, Europe, and Asia. It indicates because of its location at the point where the continents of Asia and Europe meet, Anatolia was, from the beginnings of civilization, a crossroads for numerous people migrating or conquering in either continent. And we translate that construct into the Hebrew. What we have is essentially the word sun, and so Shemesh. And here again, with respect to the kings of the East, you see these references in Hebrew to the East, the sunrise, the daylight. So these would be the kings related to the sunrise, the kings of the dawn. And here you have a listing of these kings or kingdoms that are related to Anatolia. And one name, of course, stands out. Well, a number of them stand out actually. But you also have this idea of Sargon. And then in the lower left-hand corner, you also have this word that is translating as more. So it's Mursili. And this one is indicated as the third. You should also note that Lydia is also on this list and Galatia. There are also several individuals that are associated with the Hittites. What's interesting about the Hittites, when you look at the translation of it, it's actually pronounced Kitty. And here you see a number of deity names associated with Anatolia. Interestingly, while these names are associated with Turkey or Eurasia, you can see similar names in places such as Africa. You can see similar names in other parts of Asia. And so you see some names here such as Adama. You see Allah. You see Anu. You see Ana, you see Aruna. We've talked about some of these names before. You see Ishara. And so if you go through the list, you will see a number of names that sort of stand out in terms of familiarity with other languages. And here you see a number of sun goddesses and sun gods. Also, you see here what looks like Santa. There are also some names on here with respect to these deities that sound similar to some words that are used by individuals who are speaking indigenous American languages. And so that's also noteworthy. And so wrapping this up, you can see that the kings of the East are translated as the kings of Anatolia. And of course, with kings or queens come their deities. And so essentially, the kings of the East are not only referring to the kings of Anatolia or the rulers of Anatolia, it's also referring to the deities that rule the kings or ruled the kings of Anatolia. So those would be the kings of the East and their deities. An important thing to keep in mind also is this migration from the East to the West, wherein there has been a transplanting of the people of the East. So the people of Anatolia have moved west. The people in Western Asia have moved west. The people in Eastern Asia have moved west. And so it creates a bit of confusion when trying to get some clarity about exactly where the kings of the East are located in current times. And so they may be in Anatolia, but because people of Anatolia are not stuck in Anatolia, the kings of the East could be anywhere.